Jai Hind everyone. Subject name soft skills. Subject code BS105. My name is Dr. Neetu Sharma from Applied Sciences and Humanities. Today I am going to cover Unit 1 of this subject, that is Applied Grammar and Usage. And Unit 1 I am going to present the topic Rules of Subject Verb Agreement. So what are the rules of subject verb agreement we are going to cover in today's lecture. So let's understand first that what is subject verb agreement. Subject and verb should get along like buddies. Like it means that if the subject is singular, then the verb should be singular. If the subject is plural, then the verb should be plural. So how to match verbs with subject? Let's understand this in this lecture. So subjects and verbs must agree in number. Okay. So let's understand this, but before starting this lecture or before explaining you the rules of subject verb agreement, first let me ask you one question, that can you guess that which one of them is correct? Like the players run or runs fast. So to understand this or to take the correct answer, you need to understand this, the first rule, that is if or you need to understand that how to match a singular verb with singular subject and how to match a plural verb with plural subject. So you need to understand that a singular verb always ends with s at the end in the verb. Okay, a singular verb always ends with s at the end. So now if the cow is a singular subject, then we will use eats as a singular verb. Okay, and like ducks, because this is a plural subject, so we will use quack as a plural verb with this subject. So that's the first rule which you need to understand. So now come to the exercise. So this is the exercise. The players run or runs fast, right? So you need to choose one word here. So the players run fast. As I have already told you in the beginning, that if we have singular verb or singular subject, then we use singular verb, and in singular verb we always use s at the end, right? So now this is a plural subject, players, so we will not use s at the end of the verb, so we will use only run here. The players run fast. She is or are my beautiful mother. So again, she is a singular subject, so we will use a singular verb here. She is my beautiful mother. The boys jump or jumps so high. So boys, plural subject, so obviously you are going to use a plural verb here, and plural verb doesn't end with s at the end, right? So jump is a plural verb, so we will use jump here. The boys jump so high. Laziness is or are the sibling of starvation. So here laziness is a singular subject, right? So we will use here a singular verb. Laziness is the sibling of starvation. Now don't get confused by the words that come between the subject and verb. Now I am going to show you few more sentences, and after that I will explain you the rules which I have applied or which I have used there. So it will give you an idea how to do such kind of questions or such kind of exercises and where to apply those rules. So first you need to understand the type of sentences first. Now this is the first one. The detective who was called is or are my father. So obviously you need to eliminate this who was called, because this is a noun phrase. You need to understand the detective, right? The detective is a singular subject, so we will use a singular verb here. The detective is my father. The players who won the game is or are my classmate. So here the players is a plural subject, So obviously you are not going to use a plural verb here. The players who won the game are my classmates. The students who are laughing aloud is or are from SHS. The students who are laughing aloud are from SHS, as this is a plural subject. So you are going to use a plural verb here. And who are laughing, you just ignore it. Those who act tough is or are really coward. So those who act tough, obviously now you can understand this, that those, obviously it is a plural subject, so we will use are here. Those who act tough are really coward. Now these are some such kind of sentences which have long phrases between the subject and the verb, and when you find such confusing sentences, then you need to ignore those long phrases and just consider that what is the main subject to understand that which verb you need to use here, right? So there, does not or don't seem to be any people from Scandinavia present, right? So obviously in this sentence you need to understand that there postpones the subject. So look for it after the verb. We can eliminate from Scandinavia, since that's a prepositional phrase. That leaves us only with people, right, as the subject. So people, obviously it is a plural subject, so we will use a plural verb and we don't use s with plural verb, okay? So people don't, right? So there don't seem to be any people from Scandinavia present. Jasper National Park, with its natural beauty and year-round schedule of activities, attracts visitors from all over the world. So we can eliminate with it, since that's a prepositional phrase. With its natural beauty and year-round schedule of activities, it's complete a prepositional phrase. You can eliminate this, and these are simply intervening words that need to be ignored. So that leaves us with only Jasper National Park as the subject. So now obviously Jasper National Park is a singular subject, so you will use here a singular verb, and in singular verb we always use s at the end. So Jasper National Park, with its natural beauty and year-round schedule of activities, attracts visitors from all over the world. Now, neither of the passengers was or were able to help the driver with directions. So we can eliminate of the passengers, since this is a prepositional phrase. So the subject is neither, okay? Neither is singular. Always think of it as neither one, okay? Neither is always treated as a singular subject. So neither of the passengers was able to help the driver with directions. Local interest in international commodities is oblique are increasing. So obviously now you again here you can eliminate in international commodities, since this is a prepositional phrase. So the main subject is here local interest, and local interest is a singular subject. So we are going to use here singular verb, right, that is. So local interest in international commodities is increasing. Not only the pupil but also the instructor was or were exhausted at the end of the day. So if you see here, when we use not only but also, so you need to consider that subject which is closest to the verb to understand which verb you need to use, right? So here instructor is closest to was oblique were. So instructor is a singular subject, so we are going to use here singular verb, that is was, right? So this sentence follows the agreement with the closest subject rule. Eliminate the first part, not only the people but also. You need to consider only the instructor, okay? So the instructor was, not only the pupil but also the instructor was exhausted at the end of the day. The basket of hanging flowers add a decorative touch to the balcony. So eliminate of hanging flowers. This is a prepositional phrase, so ignore it, right? So the basket is a singular subject, so we are going to add here singular verb, that is adds, right? So the basket of hanging flowers adds a decorative touch to the balcony. The basket of hanging flowers adds a decorative touch to the balcony. The porter as well as the desk clerk was or were unsure of the man's whereabouts. So ignore here as well as the desk clerk, because it doesn't use and here. Now we are not using and between the porter, okay, and so obviously it is not going to make it as a plural subject, the porter and desk clerk. We are not using it like this. We are using as well as. So here the subject is just the phrase which we have actually come between this desk clerk and porter. It is just intervening words, so you need to ignore it, right? So the porter here is obviously only one singular subject. You will consider it as a one singular subject when such kind of phrases come after singular subject, like along with, together with, as well as. Just ignore them, because we are not using and here between these two different things. They are actually referring to one. You can understand like this. So the porter as well as the desk clerk. Desk clerk is another subject, but we are not using and here, so they are not plural. You need to consider only the first principal subject, that is the porter, before the phrase, right? The porter as well as the desk clerk was unsure of the man's whereabouts. One of my biggest problems, okay, again you need to understand here that one is a singular subject. Always consider one as a singular subject and ignore, because after that of whatever that comes, it is a prepositional phrase and it doesn't actually modify the subject. Modify is one only, right? So it's not the subject itself, right? So one of my biggest problems, it's a prepositional phrase, so it modify the subject, but it's not the subject itself. It's just intervening words which to be ignored, right? So one of my biggest problems. And you need to understand one more thing, that whenever you use of prepositional phrase after one, then we always use a plural subject, right? Plural, we always use s at the end of the word, right? Like if you are using girl, then one of my book you are using, so you will say one of my books, okay, one of my movies, right? So you will simply apply s at the end of the word when you are using one, but treat one as a singular subject and use verb accordingly. So one of my biggest problems is that I cannot go for a movie today. So that is your biggest problem. You can consider like this. The owl and the loon make or makes their home in the region. The word and combines the two nouns and make the subject plural. So obviously now we are using and between the two subjects. Now these two subjects are different subjects, and obviously now they have become plural, okay? So now you will use a plural verb here. So if it helps you to get the verb right, think of plural as they, right? So they make or they makes. So obviously you will use a plural verb here, right? The owl and the loon make their home in the region. Each human hand and foot leaves or leave a distinctive print. So each is always considered as a singular subject. It doesn't actually matter that hand and foot is plural. So you just ignore it, because when we have used each is always used as a singular subject, is considered as a singular subject and always used as a singular verb. So coming in front of the subject obviously takes precedence, hand and foot. But the important thing is that you need to consider each. Think of each as each one, right? Each one live or each one leaves. What will happen? So we will use here as each human hand and foot leaves a distinctive print. Prepositional phrases between the subject and verb usually do not affect the agreement. The biker in this race. Now I hope that you have understood all the rules. So let's do few more exercises to make it clear. The biker in this race is or are very competitive. So obviously now this is a singular subject, so you are using is, going to use is here. The biker in this race is very competitive. The bikers in this race is oblique are very competitive. So obviously we are going to use are here. The bikers in this race are very competitive. One of the acts is or are broken. So we are going to use here one of the eggs is broken. As I have already told you that one is always considered as a singular subject. So this you need to use here as a singular subject. The fruits in the basket is or are fresh. So fruits obviously is a plural verb, plural subject. So we are going to use a plural verb here. The fruits in the basket are fresh. If a sentence starts with there or here, the subject will always be placed after the verb. So there is or are a meeting. So you need to consider here meeting as a subject, okay, because meeting is the subject here, and there, when we use there, so it always comes after there. So meeting is a subject and it is a singular subject. So we are going to use here a singular verb. There is a meeting. There is or are fairies in the mountain. So there are fairies in the mountain. Here is or are the results from this past month. So obviously results is the main subject. So that is a plural subject. So we are going to use a plural verb here. Here are the results from this past month. There is or are man who loves us for who we are. Okay. So there is or are man. So there is man. So man is a singular subject. So we are going to use is here. There is man who loves us for who we are. Subjects can come after the verb in questions. So obviously when you use questions, when you actually frame sentences, interrogative sentences, so the subjects can come after the verb. So if you see this does or do, so when we start a sentence with does or do, so obviously it takes a form of question, right? So when we frame sentences, interrogative sentences, so we need to consider that our subject comes after the verb. So here Betty is obviously it is a singular subject, so you are going to use a singular verb, and that is does. So does Betty always? How is or are the Bosco sticks today? Bosco sticks is a plural subject, right? Bosco sticks are plural subject, so obviously we are going to use a verb that is plural. So how are the Bosco sticks today? Does or do a fairy live in the mountain? So fairy, obviously this is a singular subject, so we are going to use a singular verb. Does a fairy live in the mountain? Does or do monsters live in the mountain? So we are going to use here do. Do monsters live in the mountain? Because monsters is a plural subject, so we are going to use here do as a plural verb. If two subjects are joined by and, they typically require a plural verb. The puppy and the lady is or are friends. So the puppy and the lady, obviously these are two subjects, two different subjects, so they have become plural now. So we are going to use are here. The puppy and the lady are friends. Anna and Nika is or are my sisters. So Anna and Nika are my sisters. You can pronounce it as a Nika also. Anna and Nika are my sisters. Maria and the people live or lives happily together. So again here this is a plural subject. Obviously we are going to use a plural verb here. Maria and the people live happily together. The verb is singular if the two subjects are joined by and, but they refer to the same person, place or thing. So pork and beans is or are my mom's favorite dish. I have not written here dishes. I have written here only dish. So dish is a singular subject. Now you can understand that pork and beans is referring to one single dish. So this is a singular subject now. Okay, so pork and beans is my mom's favorite dish. Spaghetti and meatballs is or are my favorite pasta dish. Again the same type of sentence. So again we consider as a singular subject, and we are going to use here a singular verb. So spaghetti and meatballs is my favorite pasta dish. My friend and confident is or are loyal. So obviously here my friend, that is the same person I am referring to, he is confident also, right? He is my confidantee also. So that's why I will consider it as a singular subject. So my friend and confident is loyal, because I am referring to the same person, both the qualities. If the words eat, every or no come before the subject, the verb is singular. So I have already told you this in the previous sentences, that when we use each, every, we always consider them as a singular subject, and we always use a singular verb after them. So each boy and girl has or have to take the test. So here each, obviously we have used before the subject, then it has become a singular subject. So you are going to use a singular verb here. Each boy and girl has to take the test. Every frog and toad turn or turns into a prince. Again, every we are using before a subject. So obviously now it has become a singular subject. So we are going to use a singular verb here. Every frog and toad turns into a prince. No paper and pen is or are required. So if you are using no, again it becomes a singular subject. So we are going to use a singular verb here. No paper and pen is required. If two subjects, so now you have come to the rules. I think that you have derived the rule after reading lots of sentences. That is the rule 9. If two subjects are joined by or, nor, neither, nor, either, or, and not only but also the verbs agrees to the nearest subject. Sally or Bobby has or have stolen the scarecrow. So obviously Bobby is a singular subject and it is nearest to the verb, that is has or have. So we are going to use a singular verb here because Bobby is a singular subject. So Sally or Bobby has stolen the scarecrow. Not only the guitar player but also the drummers was or were soaked with sweat. So here drummers is a plural subject. So we are going to use here a plural verb, right? Not only the guitar player but also the drummers were soaked with sweat. Either my sisters or my mom has or have sent me a present. So my mom is a singular subject which is close to the verb or nearest to the verb. So we are going to use here a singular verb, right? Either my sisters or my mom has sent me a present. Not only Bob but also the carpenters. This is the same sentence which is I am repeating again. So now you can see not only Bob but also you need to ignore this complete one and you need to see only the subject which is closest to the verb, and that is carpenters. Carpenters is a plural subject. Obviously we are going to use a plural verb here. Not only Bob but also the carpenters want some hamburgers for supper. Units of measurement usually use a singular verb. 6 gallons of paint was used on the house. As I have told you that measures with the unit which we use for measuring, we always use a singular verb with them, right? $5 is or are too much for a cup of coffee. So you are going to use is here. $5 is too much for a cup of coffee. Fractions may take singular or plural verbs depending on the of phrase. So it means that if we are using fractions, then you need to understand the sentence, you need to understand the complete sentence in what context and what it is actually referring to. Either it is referring to a subject which is singular or it is referring to a subject which is plural. So you need to understand the type, the subject which is being used in the sentence after reading the sentence completely. 2/3 of the farm is or are planted. So here we are talking about one single farm and about its part, right? So it's obviously is a singular subject. 2/3 of the farm is planted. 1/2 of the coconuts is or are to be sold. So coconuts, it can be 20, it can be 30. So there are number of coconuts and we have sold one half, right? So we need to sell one half. So obviously this is a plural subject. So we are going to use a plural verb here. One half of the coconuts are to be sold. Half of the chicken is or are eaten. So obviously chicken here is a singular subject and you have cut it into two parts, same chicken. So that is a singular subject. So half of the chicken is eaten. Nouns such as civics, measles, mathematics and news require singular verbs. The news, obviously this is a singular subject. We are using s at the end, but this is not a plural subject. It's a singular subject. The news about the three kings is sadly received by the people, right? So we are going to use a singular verb here. Again, mathematics, we are using s at the end, but this is not a plural word. This is a singular subject. Mathematics is one subject, okay? I'm talking one subject. So mathematics is my favorite subject. Most indefinite pronouns take singular verbs like one, body, thing, someone, somebody, something, anyone, anybody, anything, no one, nobody, nothing, everyone, everybody, everything. So I have already explained you this in the previous slides that if you are using all these indefinite pronouns, then you always consider them as a singular subject and we are going to use a singular verb with them. So like everyone, everybody is happy, no one has a dime, nothing was going to happen. Both, few, many and several take a plural verb. Several need to finish the race. So several is always considered as a plural subject. So you need to use a plural verb here. Okay. Several need to finish the race. A few have the right to answer. Collective nouns usually take a singular verb. For example, the class was ready for test. The class was ready for the test. The herd is stampeding. The herd is stampeding. Titles of books, movies, novels, etc. are treated as singular. Like, Holes was one of my favorite books. I want to see the movie. So Holes, this is the name, the title, this is the title of the book and it is written as a plural word, but actually it is the title of the book which is always considered as a singular subject. Final rule. Remember, only the subject affects the verb. Now let me just show you the rules again, only the rules which you need to revise again so that you can remember them, you can learn them for your exams. So let's revise all the rules once again. So first rule which I have told you is about singular and plural subjects, okay? So if the word is singular, if the subject is singular, then you are going to use a singular verb and you need to understand that in singular verb, we always use s at the end of the word, right? If you are using a plural subject, then we always use a plural verb, but we don't use s at the end of the verb. Next rule, don't get confused by the words that come between the subject and verb, right? After this, the next rule which you need to understand is that prepositional phrases between the subject and verb usually do not affect the agreement. If a sentence starts with there or here, the subject will always be placed after the verb. Subjects can come after the verb in questions. If two subjects are joined by and, they typically require a plural verb. The verb is singular if the two subjects are joined by and, but they refer to the same person, place or thing, right? If the words each, every or no come before the subject, the verb is singular. If two subjects are joined by or, nor, neither nor either, or, and, not only but also, the verb agrees to the nearest subject. Again, understand this rule: if two subjects are joined by or, nor, neither nor, either or, and not only but also, the verbs agree to the verb agrees to the nearest subject. Units of measurement usually use a singular verb. Fractions may take singular or plural verbs depending on the of phrase. Most indefinite pronouns take singular verbs. Both few, many, and several take a plural verb. Collective nouns usually take a singular verb. Titles of books, movies, novels, etc. are treated as singular. Final rule, again remember, only the subject affects the verb. So you need to understand the number of subject. What is the subject? As it if it is plural, then use a plural verb. If it is a singular, then use a singular verb. So you need to consider only what the subject is in a sentence and what type of subject it is. Either it may be a singular or plural. That's all in this lecture. Thank you for watching.